Draco Malfoy and the Letter from the Future. My Draco will hear about this. Chapter 7. Down the Trapdoor. Their end-of-term exams passed in a blurry of worry over Harry and the Dark Lord. Draco was watching Snape closely whenever he crossed his path, almost more obsessed with ensuring the man did not get to the Philosopher's Stone than Harry had been in the first place. Hermione and Weasley did not quite understand this fear. Hermione was sure that the Dark Lord would not dare to act right under Dumbledore's nose, and Weasley reckoned that Hagrid would rather jump into the lake and hug the giant squid than letting down the headmaster. But as much affection as Draco held for Hagrid, he had no illusions about the man's ability to keep secrets. They had been able to tickle information out of him before, and Snape was much more experienced a Slytherin than Draco was. He figured that Hermione and Weasley just didn't grasp the whole extent of the danger, seeing that they had not been in that force with them. Draco, though, could not get the hooded shape of the Dark Lord out of his head, and neither could Harry, it seemed. It was a good thing Draco had spent every night for the last couple of months studying, because otherwise he was unsure how he would have passed any of his exams. Thankfully, though, he had, and the answers came easily to him once he tried to shut out the worry and fear long enough to concentrate. After his last exam, transformation, he went out to join his Gryffindor friends outside by the lake. The weather was hot, and they had decided to laze around outside after their respective exams and enjoy their newly won freedom. That is, assuming I don't doze off on my History of Magic exam, Weasley had grumbled. He found them spread out on the grass, but just as he was approaching them, Harry suddenly jumped up, his eyes wide. I've just thought of something. He could hear the other boy say, his voice unsettled. We've got to go and see Hagrid, now. And with that, he took off right into the direction Draco was coming from. What's wrong? Draco asked, but Harry just grabbed his arm and pulled him along. Behind him, Hermione and Weasley struggled to keep up. Why, Harry? Hermione panted. Don't you think it's a bit odd, Harry called, that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon, and a stranger turns up who just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs if it's against wizard law? Lucky they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't I see it before? You don't mean... Draco gasped, his eyes widening. Snape? Harry's mouth was set in a grim line as he nodded curtly, and they continued hurrying down the grass slope towards Hagrid's hut. When they reached it, Hagrid was sitting outside in an armchair preparing ingredients for dinner. Hello, he called, smiling as he watched them approach. Finished your exams. Got time for a drink? Yes, please, Ron muttered, but Harry cut him off, getting straight to the point and asking Hagrid about the night he had acquired Norbert. Hagrid, after some prodding, told them that he had played a hooded man in cards for the egg, and that he had talked to him about Hogwarts and the creatures he cared for there. He had to be sure I could handle it. He didn't want it to go to any old home, Hagrid explained, frowning as he tried to remember. So I told him, after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy. Draco gaped at the giant gamekeeper with a sense of foreboding, and Harry asked, trying to sound casual. And did he seem interested in Fluffy? Well, yeah, how many three-headed dogs do you meet even around Hogwarts? So I told him, Fluffy's a piece of cake if you know how to calm him down. Just play him a bit of music and he'll go straight off to sleep. He cut himself off at the look of horror that mirrored and Draco. Well, I should have told you that, he called. Forget who said that! But Harry had already taken off running, and Draco, Hermione, and Weasley struggled to keep up with him, ignoring Hagrid's yelling at them. Only when they had reached the entrance hall did Harry stop and turn to face them. We've got to go to Dumbledore, he announced, and Draco nodded eagerly. We do, he agreed. Too many things have happened and we can't let Snape get his hands on the stone. Exactly, Harry replied, looking around. Where's Dumbledore's office? Draco said, eloquently blinking. What are you doing inside? A suspicious voice got through their dialogue, and then they whirled around to face Professor McGonagall, frowning at them around a pile of books she was carrying. We want to see Professor Dumbledore, Hermione answered, which seemed to make the professor even more suspicious. Why? She asked. Professor, Draco said, stepping in, we know this might sound strange, but we have reason to believe that someone has been poking around for information to get his hands on the Philosopher's Stone and succeeded. And if nothing's done, this person will steal it and hand it to the Dark Lord, and... And he will try to kill Harry. But Draco did not voice that last part, instead gulping and standing very straight, looking defiantly at their teacher, who was staring at him in open-mouthed shock, the books in her hands having crashed to the floor and splattered there. "How?" she began, but Draco shook his head immediately. "It doesn't matter how we know," he insisted. "What matters now is the precautions are taken, and for that we need to tell Professor Dumbledore what we know." McGonagall stared at him long and hard, as if trying to read his mind, and reflexively Draco tried to empty his head and fight down his emotions. It did not seem, though, that she was a legilimens, because when she spoke, it was not in interrogation. "I don't know how you found out about the stone," she began, "but rest assured no one could possibly steal it. It's too well protected." "But that's the thing," Draco called. "Someone found out how to get past your protections, and we need to tell—" "Professor Dumbledore received an urgent hour from the Ministry and flew off to London at once," she interrupted him. That made Draco old and eyes wide. "He's gone?" he repeated, looking around to meet Harry's eyes. "Yes," McGonagall confirmed. "He will be back by tomorrow, so if you still feel the need to talk to him then—" "But they might try tonight," Harry called. "What if— Potter!" McGonagall ground out impatiently. "There is no need to worry. Our protections have held for months, and they will hold another night. I know what I'm talking about. Now," she said, bending down to pick up the books, "I suggest you go back outside and enjoy the sunshine." Draco opened his mouth again, ready to fight her, but Hermione caught his arm and shook her head. It was only when McGonagall was out of earshot that they spoke again. "It's tonight," Harry muttered. "Snape's going through the trapdoor tonight." "Of course he is!" Draco muttered, a note of panic in his voice. "He orchestrated this fabulously! Dumbledore is out of the way, none of the other teachers suspecting a thing." "But what could we—" Weasley began, though he stopped talking when Hermione gasped, staring paralyzed at something past Draco's right shoulder. He turned slowly, and his heart sank when he found himself face to face with none other than Snape. A thick silence fell upon them. "Good afternoon," Snape said smoothly, observing them with his sharp, dark eyes. "You shouldn't be inside on a day like this." Harry began, but Draco stepped on his foot, silencing him. Snape looked from Harry to Draco, his eyes narrowing. Draco steeled himself, setting his jaw stubbornly and holding the gaze of his head of house without backing down. "You want to be more careful," Snape said in a soft, dangerous voice that was laced with underlying threat. "Hanging around like this, people will think you are up to something." Draco pressed his lips tightly together, still not breaking their staring contest. "I won't let you touch him," Draco thought, almost hoping that Snape, unlike McGonagall, would try to read his mind. "Be warned," Snape continued, his eyes finally landing back on Harry, making Draco feel strangely satisfied. "Any more nighttime wanderings, and I will personally make sure you are expelled. Good day." And with that, he turned his back on them and walked away, disappearing into the staff room. "Right," Harry muttered, turning back to them. "Here's what we've got to do." He suggested for Hermione to stand guard by the staff room while they watched the third-floor corridor, but Draco quickly waved him off. "This will never work," he shook his head. "Hermione can't just linger by the staff room forever. Someone will eventually catch us near the third-floor corridor, especially after we spoke to McGonagall. Not to mention that Snape could dispose of us easily, even if we blocked his way." "Do you have a better idea, then?" Harry demanded. Draco stayed silent, thinking. Two of his basic instincts battled with each other. His rational sense for survival and the knowledge that if they crossed Snape's path, it might not end well for them, versus the urgent need to protect Harry. He knew that they had to stop Snape before he got his hands on the stone and handed it to the Dark Lord. But what good would it do if they got themselves killed before they could achieve that? "Let's write to Dumbledore," Draco suggested. "The letter might not reach him in time." Harry shook his head. "And who says he'll believe us even if it did?" Hermione muttered, biting her lip. "Then we have to get the stone before him," Draco said, almost to himself. Everyone blinked at him, perplexed. "What?" Harry asked. "You mean we—" "Yes." He took a deep breath, nodding. "You're right. We have to go." "We don't know how to get past the other enchantments, though," Draco reminded him, biting his lip. "How are we going to—" "We'll have to risk it." Harry shook his head.
These enchantments were done by teachers to stop a fully skilled wizard from getting his hands on the stone, Harry,"
Hermione interjected, her voice small. "You don't actually think we will be able to—" "We won't know unless we try," Weasley insisted. "Malfoy's right, we'll have to do it." Draco was not sure which part shook him the most. The fact that he had just suggested they'd better head down a forbidden corridor to face a murderous three-headed dog and other dangerous and possibly deadly obstacles? Or that Weasley had agreed with him. Harry, Hermione, and Weasley had been all for going down at night after everyone had gone to bed. But Draco had quickly talked them out of that. Snape would probably wait until nighttime to make sure his colleagues wouldn't suspect anything, and if they wanted to be the first ones at the stone and not cross paths with him, they would have to go earlier. Therefore, he convinced Harry to pick up his invisibility cloak so they could start right away. They waited for him in an abandoned classroom on the second floor and slipped under the cloak when he returned. They had the hunch to be able to all fit, to the point where Draco felt like he was waddling rather than walking, but sacrifices had to be made. It was only when they neared the third-floor corridor, having made sure no teachers were around to see the door opening and closing, and Draco could hear the restless grumbling of Fluffy muffled through the wood, that Draco turned to Harry. "How are we going to get past Fluffy?" he asked in a whisper. "We don't have any—" But he trailed off when Harry held up a clumsily carved flute. "Christmas present from Hagrid," he hissed, and Draco nodded. Weasley reached out to heave the door open, and they slipped inside completely unnoticed by the rest of the castle. Draco had spent a lot of time imagining the monstrous dog from Harry's words, but somehow standing before it after all, he still felt unprepared. All three heads of the dog growled and sniffed the air, searching for the intruders he could not see. Draco was glad that Harry didn't freeze the way Draco had. Instead, he started playing the flute the moment the door had fallen closed behind him. Despite Harry's abysmal musical talents, the beast's eyes immediately dropped at the sound of the flute, and soon it had stretched it on the floor, all three heads snoring softly as if they were in competition with each other. Weasley warned Harry to keep playing as they approached the trap door and pulled it open. There was no telling what expected them underneath. There were no stairs, only pitch-black darkness. Harry insisted on being the one to go first, and he handed the flute to Hermione. As he started to lower himself, he warned them to not follow if anything happened to him, as if, Draco thought grimly, but to go and send Hedwig to Dumbledore instead. Then he dropped. Draco leaned over the hole and waited, heart hammering for any sign of life. There was a damp sound of collision, softer than Draco had expected, and some shuffling before Harry called, "It's okay, it's a soft landing, you can jump." Weasley followed first, and Draco went second. Draco almost landed on Harry, and all three of them shuffled back to make room for Hermione to land. "What's this?" Draco asked, frowning at the plant underneath them, which seemed to be moving, as if faintly angry at being disturbed. Before anyone could answer, though, Hermione had landed in front of them with a dull thumping sound.
"We must be miles under the school," she muttered, breathless and anxious.
It was in that moment that Draco felt the tendrils of the plant sling around his wrist. He yelled and jumped up, pulling his arm to fight it off just in time. Hermione followed quickly, and they both backed up against the wall, escaping the plant with some effort, but it was too late for Harry and Weasley. They had been bound tightly by the plant's tendrils and seemed to be pulled under by it.
"Stop moving!"
Hermione called at them from next to him.
"It's a devil's snare!"
Draco cursed, panicked. He made a step forward thoughtlessly, as if to pull Harry out with his bare hands, but Hermione clung to Draco's arm, holding him back. She was still shouting at them, and there were angry responses, but Draco could not listen to them. There was a rushing noise in his ears, a panic that drowned out everything else and made him unable to think. He only snapped out of it when Hermione sent blue flames towards the plant, making it flinch away from their heat and allowing Harry and Weasley to free themselves and join them. They were panting, and Draco took deep, calming breaths as he slowly regained the feeling in his limbs. "I hate this," he muttered mostly to himself. No one heard him. Hermione and Weasley were too busy bickering, and they only stopped when Harry urged them along. They walked down an empty stone passageway, and the complete silence and darkness felt oppressive to Draco. He balled his fingers into a fist to keep them from shaking. His eyes drifted to Harry, who was walking ahead of them, shoulders tense and alert, but emanating a calmness that reminded Draco of their detention in the forest. Draco wished for a moment that he had Harry's nerves or his courage. He felt stupid trying to fight down what felt like a panic attack. This had been his idea after all. But then again, the Sorting Hat hadn't put him into Slytherin for nothing. He had a strong sense of self-preservation. His deep-rooted response to danger was to run, not to face it with his head held high. But he had no choice, he reminded himself. Harry's life was on the line. "Can't you read something?" Weasley whispered suddenly. They all held in, listening. Soft, dull sounds filtered through the air, but before Draco could identify them, the others were already discussing in soft whispers.
"Do you think it's a ghost?"
"I don't know. Sounds like wings to me. There's light ahead. I could see something moving." They entered a bright chamber with little bird-like shapes flying across the room. They held in at the doorway, and Draco blinked against the brightness, his eyes slowly adjusting to the light as he tried to recognize the flying creatures. Harry and Weasley were muttering next to him, and Harry was getting ready to run across the room when Draco grasped his arm, stopping him.
"Harry," he muttered, pointing up. "Those are keys!"
"What?" Harry asked, following Draco's gaze and gasping. Hundreds of keys in various shapes and forms were fluttering over their heads, their feathery wings making them resemble birds, unless you looked closely. Draco drew his eyes away from them, taking in the room. There was a wooden door on the other side, closed. Broomsticks were perched up against the wall beside it. It took no genius to figure out this one.
"One of these keys opens the door," he said, pointing at the brooms. "We need to catch it." "But there are hundreds of them,"
Hermione pointed out. Weasley took a careful step forward, and when the keys took no note of him, he walked over to the door, examining the lock. "Well, look at the big old-fashioned one. Probably silver, like the handle." It was harder than Draco had expected. The keys were faster than any snitch and dove into flight every time one of them tried to grab for them. Harry made good use of his seeker reflexes, though. He was the first to spot the large silver key with blue wings, and the four of them cornered it until Harry could snatch it from the air. It was a perfect fit, and the door unlocked. Being up on a broom and focused on the search had calmed Draco's nerves a little, but they came back with full force when they stepped into the next room, which was too dark to make out anything in it. But as soon as they entered, the room lightened up, revealing a giant chessboard to their view. It was pretty clear what they had to do here as well, and even Weasley understood immediately. The boy quickly took the lead, seeing as he was arguably the best chess player among them. They had to take the place of 4 black chess pieces. Hermione became a castle, Weasley a knight, and Harry and Draco took the positions of the 2 bishops. White started off the game, and Weasley played them across the room with remarkable skill. Draco paid close attention to his moves, especially when it became clear that the taken pieces were knocked out with the same violence that had always scandalized Hermione about wizard's chess. But Weasley played an impeccable game, and Draco found no fault in his strategy. It was when they strived closer to victory, though, that Draco had to interfere for the first time. "Yes," Weasley muttered, thoughtful and grim as his eyes skimmed over the board. "That's the only way. I'm going to be taken." Harry and Hermione yelled in protest, arguing with Weasley, but Draco scanned the board, going through every possibility in his head. "There's another way," he said suddenly, pointing to a stray pawn at his right. "It's too dangerous, Malfoy," groaned Weasley, glaring at him. "They might move the king and then—" "Let them," Draco shrugged. "We're in no hurry, are we? It's worth prolonging the game if we all come out unscathed." "We need to grasp the chance while it's there," Weasley protested heatedly. "We can't risk losing our dominant position." "We have time," Draco stressed. "We can afford to give away one chance. No one knows we're here, and it'll be hours before Snape gets steal down here. Who knows what other things we'll have to face next? Those were 4 tasks, meaning there's 3 more ahead. We can't afford to lose anyone now." Weasley huffed, opening his mouth to argue back, but Harry cut him off. "Draco was right," he insisted. "We're not giving up anyone unless we absolutely have to, Ron. Play the pawn." Ron rolled his eyes, but at Harry's words he retaliated, and it was worth it in the end. It was a close call, and almost all their other pieces were lost, but Weasley managed to checkmate the Black King about 20 minutes later. The giant chess pieces bowed in defeat and let the four of them pass, and they exited the room into the next dark passageway.
What do you reckon is next?
Harry asked, keeping his voice low. We've had sprouts. That was the devil's snare, Hermione muttered, counting the tasks down on her fingers. Flitwick must have put charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's.
And Dumbledore's, Draco reminded her as they reached the next door. His nerves were tingling feebly again, but Draco pressed down on them decisively. Harry pushed the door open, and an overwhelming smell of rotten food greeted them. The smell pulled at Draco's memories, but before he could place it, an angry growl greeted them, and Draco screamed as they once again were faced with an angry mountain troll. "Not again," Weasley muttered faintly, and then they had to duck as the troll swung its heavy club at them. It was a team effort this time. Hermione levitated the club in an imitation of Weasley's move on Halloween. Harry kicked the troll when it went for Hermione, distracting it from attacking their friend, who let the club drop in shock. Draco stung the troll in the leg with fire, making it roar and let off Harry, turning to Draco instead, which gave Weasley enough time to levitate the club a second time and knock the troll out with it before it could reach Draco. "I should consider this as a professional career," Weasley noted rather smugly as they fled the route to escape the stench. "I seem to be rather good at knocking out trolls." Draco opened his mouth to note that his success was probably down to his IQ being similar to a troll's, but he closed it again. Not the moment for smart remarks, he decided, especially not after Weasley had shown more use on their little mission than Draco had, realistically speaking. Instead, he focused his thoughts in another direction. "Was that one Snape's?" Draco asked, dubious. "He let the troll into the castle on Halloween, supposedly, and he wouldn't have bothered Quirrell about getting past a troll if—" But they reached the next door then, and he fell silent. Harry exchanged a look with them before he pulled it open. Inside they found a dimly lit room, in its center a table with a variety of potions perched on it.
"I think this one's Snape's," Harry pointed out, frowning. "What do we have to do?"
Draco frowned, staring at the bottles, confused at this turn of events. With the way Snape had threatened Quirrell, he had expected a powerful curse from their defense against the dark arts professor. Snape could have easily dealt with a troll. Something about this did not add up, and he was going to voice this as Harry stepped into the room. Hermione yelped again and pulled both Draco and Weasley forward as well, just in time to escape the purple flames that suddenly sprang to life in the doorway. Draco scanned the room and saw that black flames were covering the doorway on the other side of the room too. "Great," Weasley muttered. "What now?" "Look!" Hermione called, picking up a rolled parchment from the table. She unrolled it and read out a poem, but Draco, still too occupied with the matter of the troll, was unable to take it in fully. "Brilliant!" Hermione said, obviously relieved when she was done. "This isn't magic. It's logic. A puzzle. A lot of the greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck in it forever." She then proceeded to solve the riddle, and Draco left her to it, strolling around, gazing into the fire, and thinking. Why had Quirrell chosen a troll in the first place, with the way he had obviously been frightened by the creature's entrance to the castle at Halloween? Wouldn't he have chosen something he could control and others couldn't, the way Hagrid had done? And wasn't it too much of a coincidence that two different teachers would choose trolls in matters regarding the Philosopher's Stone? Sure, if Snape had known about the troll, he might have stolen Quirrell's idea and used it as distraction to get to the stone himself on Halloween. But the fact that he had threatened Quirrell did not fit that picture. They were missing something here. What were they missing? "Got it," Hermione announced, drawing Draco out of his mewling. "The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire. Close the stem."
"There's only enough for one of us,"
Harry pointed out.
"That's hardly one swallow." "Maybe it will fill up again once one of us is passed through?"
Ron asked hopefully. "I doubt it," Hermione frowned. "It's probably the point of this task that only one person can pass at a time, and we'll still be in here even when Harry leaves, which I assume the magic of this room must sense." There was a moment of silence before Harry asked,
"Which one will get you back through the purple flames?"
Hermione pointed at one of the bottles. It was slightly bigger than the other one, enough that it could probably be divided between 2 or 3 people, if one was careful.
Maybe it would even suffice for all 4 of them.
I'll go in,
Harry announced, taking a deep breath.
You wait here, and if I'm not back in half an hour, you go up and write to Dumbledore.
No, Draco said immediately. There's no way you're going alone.
There's no other way, Harry argued. You heard Hermione.
But Harry's right, Draco, Hermione interjected, biting her lip. There's no other way. One of us needs to go, and Harry is probably best suited.
I'll agree, Weasley nodded. Let Harry go.
Draco gnawed at his bottom lip, trying to find some argument against this insanity. Under normal circumstances, he'd have agreed. Harry kept a cool head in dangerous situations, the way none of them did, least of all Draco, and while he was not as logical as Hermione or Draco, he was definitely more likely to see through any traps on his own than Weasley. Harry, though, was also the person Draco was most scared for, and the most likely to react impulsively and therefore put his life at risk.
Draco,
Harry said softly, touching the Slytherin's shoulder and meeting his eyes.
I promise I'll be careful.
We've come down here to make sure the Dark Lord can't get his hands on the stone to come back and hurt you, Draco reminded him in a tight voice. It will have been for nothing if you get hurt while trying to protect it.
Not only will I be in danger if Voldemort comes back to power,
Harry muttered, making all 3 of them flinch at the use of the name, but ignoring it.
Everyone will be in danger. We can't just step back and do nothing.
There's no need for you to sacrifice yourself, Draco hissed.
I was aware of the dangers when I agreed to do this,
Harry said with grim determination.
I am okay with getting hurt if it means I can stop Voldemort from coming back. Aren't you?
Draco gulped. Honestly, he did not know if he would have done this if Harry wasn't directly threatened. He was pretty sure he wouldn't have. He would have looked elsewhere and convinced himself the danger was not as immediate as it seemed. It was fear for Harry alone that had spurred him on. But when he looked over at Hermione and Weasley, he saw the same look of grim determination on their faces that Harry spotted. The Gryffindors were all ready to sacrifice themselves for the greater good.
Stupidly courageous and noble, the lot of them!
They made Draco feel terribly selfish for wanting to protect his friend over the rest of the world. Fine, Draco said very quietly. But if you get yourself killed...
You'll do what? Kill me again?
Harry asked, the corners of his lips twitching. I'll find a way to do it, Draco promised darkly. Slytherin, remember? We're very resourceful. Harry chuckled, a real smile spreading across his face. It made Draco smile back, if only reluctantly. Harry squeezed his shoulder once more before turning back to the potions.
Okay.
He nodded, picking up the tiny bottle.
I'm ready.
Draco watched nervously as the other boy drank the potion and made his way through the black fire. With a grin thrown at them over his shoulder, he opened the door, and then he was gone. There was silence between the remaining 3 as they waited. Draco paced the room, kneading his fingers with nervousness. Weasley stared at the door Harry had disappeared through, not once moving his eyes away. Hermione was fumbling with the parchment, unrolling it to reread it and checking the potions, just for something to do. Hermione, Draco said finally, wheeling his thoughts away from Harry and back to what had been bothering him earlier. Can we be sure that it was Snape who let in the troll on Halloween? Hermione looked up at him in confusion, and even Weasley turned his eyes away from the door to stare at Draco. What do you mean? She asked, puzzled. Don't you think it's odd, Draco frowned, stopping his pacing to look at her, that a troll turns up on Halloween, and Quirrell finds it, and then he turns out to have used a troll to protect the stone? Why would he have done that if he could not deal with them?
He might have used the troll because it scares him,
Ron argued. It's still not exactly the best protection if a bunch of first-years can knock one out 2 times in a row, Draco pointed out. But even disregarding the stupidity of it, don't you think it's all too big of a coincidence? Hermione looked at him, contemplating. I see what you mean, she admitted, but Snape was the one who got hurt trying to get past Fluffy. He was the one who tried to get rid of Harry after he'd seen the wound. I saw him do it, and he was the one threatening Quirrell. But why would he threaten Quirrell like this over a stupid troll? Draco demanded. It makes no sense. Snape could deal with a troll if we can. He could, Hermione nodded, biting her lip. You're right. We're missing something, Draco continued. There must be something we've overlooked or misunderstood because...
But in that moment, the door Harry had disappeared through opened again, and the other boy returned, looking triumphant. He had a big blood-red stone clutched in his left hand. "You got it!" Weasley exclaimed, letting out a whoop of joy. "The mirror of Erised is behind that door," Harry explained, grinning. "I looked at it, and my reflection put the stone into my pocket. Suddenly it was there."
Just like that? Hermione asked, perplexed. Shouldn't that have been harder? Why would Dumbledore just hand the stone to anyone who looked into that mirror?
"I don't know, Hermione," Harry shrugged, "but we have it, and now we should get out of here before Snape arrives."
"We should," Draco agreed, picking up the bottle Hermione had pointed out to get them through the purple flames, looking at it closely. "We'll have to be careful just to drink a small sip each so no one gets stuck here." He handed the bottle to Hermione first, then Harry, before he took a sip himself. He did not trust Weasley to measure his gulp correctly the way he always wolfed down his food. And when they had all drunk, they made their way through the flames and out of the door. As they made their way through the passageways, Draco tried to guess how much time had passed. How long had they been down here? It was sure to be evening, but how late exactly would it be? Would they be able to escape unseen before Snape or whoever it was that was after the stone made their way down to get it? Just as he was pondering this, they could hear the sound of dampened footsteps from the distance. Draco froze. So did the others. "No!" Draco whispered, looking at Harry, who hastily shoved the stone into the pocket of his trousers. Draco desperately tried to think of a place to hide. If only they had already passed the chessboard, they could have kept to the shadows there. But they'd only just left the room with the unconscious troll, and there were no shadows or hidden quarters there. The footsteps grew louder. Harry stood a little straighter and grasped his wand, as if getting ready for a fight. Draco wanted to laugh. Harry didn't really think they stood a chance against Snape or anyone else in league with Voldemort. They hadn't even learned to defend themselves against unfriendly attacks yet. The best they could do was throw a nasty hex at them and run! At this thought, Draco also grasped his wand, going through every helpful spell he had ever learned or just heard of. They were now able to make out the shape of a man in the distance. Draco's heart sank. Even from far away, that purple turban was clearly recognizable.